The most important job in the world may also be one we talk about the least. We're going to fix that today, you guys, because today we're going to have a conversation about caregiving with experts who have devoted their lives to the topic. Welcome, everyone. I'm Laura DeFranco, the CEO of Brave Healer Productions Publishing, where we are helping the world experience what's possible. And here today to help me with that mission are some of the amazing authors of one of our newest books. You guys, this book, The Caregiver's Advocate, check it out. A complete guide to support and resources. This is our volume 3 in an award-winning series of books. I've got a huge shout out to our lead author, Debbie DeMoss Compton today. Debbie, we wouldn't be here without you. And, you know, these covers, I love collaborating with our cover artists. So Davide, DeAngelis, thank you so much for all that beautiful design. Oh my gosh. You know, I like to match my covers, right? So I got my purple on today. So I've got some pretty cool people in my Zoom room. Before I introduce them to you, I just want to say one more word about Debbie. She is an incredible human. She had a very big vision and mission for this book, for the series of books. And I just have so much gratitude to you, Debbie, for what you put together, for gathering this stellar group of experts around you to really serve in this particular way on a very important topic. So thank you. So I've got Nancy Treaster with me. She's a certified caregiving consultant and retired software executive who co-founded the nonprofit, The Caregiver's Journey, and co-hosts its Gold Stevie award-winning podcast, ranked the #1 how-to podcast in the US on Apple. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, ma'am.
Leslie Sedil is here. She serves as family liaison at Paradise Home Healthcare, guiding families through senior care with both compassion and expertise. Leslie, I'm happy to have you here today. We've also got Dr. Makiba Morgan Hill. She's a spiritual life coach and 3-time best-selling author who works with high responsibility professionals through her Living for Love brand and the Soul Bloom method. And Makiba, we're going to start this party off with you today. Can you tell us a little bit about the why behind the chapter that you wrote for the Caregiver's Advocate?
Sure. Thank you, Laura, for that beautiful introduction. I am Dr. Makiba, the author of chapter 20 in the book. And the title of my chapter is The Heart of the Caregiver, the heart of a caregiver, how to stay whole while caring for everyone else. And I work with clients every day who are caring for parents, caring for their children, or are caregiving professionals, healthcare workers, teachers, all of these folks who give, 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 give. And I just really felt that there was a need to share their story about how it's challenging to pour into yourself when you're pouring into everyone else, but you've got to do that. It's as important as eating a meal or drinking some water. So that's really the why. It's to help to encourage people and provide some tools to make time for themselves.
So this is a big deal, and it's actually going to be the entire next question I ask all of you. So you're like 3 steps ahead of me, Makiba, this morning. But I want you to talk a little bit more about that. Out in the world of all of these people that you're serving and helping, the stories that have been shared, what do you think has been the biggest problem that you see with what you're talking about, like filling their cup back up?
Mm-hmm. The biggest problem that I've seen is that time seems like it is a problem. Time seems like, there's not enough time. And so the challenge is helping people to realize that time is the only resource that we don't get back. And so we've got to use every moment with care, and that even if we are giving to everyone else, we've got to enjoy this life we're living too. And so that means spending time with yourself, on yourself. Because again, I go back to on the airplane when they say give yourself the oxygen mask before you give it to anyone else. And you're like, but my baby needs the oxygen, but your baby is not going to get the oxygen if you're passed out because you don't have enough air. So time, making time, prioritizing yourself in the whole mix, I think has been the biggest challenge for me in working with clients across the board. It's like, how do we make time?
So you may not get an hour, but you might get 5 minutes, right? Tell me a little bit more about
Exactly.
that, like how you think of that.
Exactly. I believe in sprinkling it in throughout the day, making quality efforts to be intentional about the time spent with yourself. So in my chapter, I talk about, waking up a few minutes early, spending some time to meditate a little bit. And I think sometimes people are like, well, I don't meditate, but you don't have to. You could just be quiet for a little bit. Center your attention on yourself, your breath. Be grateful that you woke up. Like there's several things that you can do throughout the day to find little micro moments to be with yourself, but be intentional about it.
Yeah, perfect. Makiba, thank you for saying yes to this project. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Leslie, let's move over to you. Tell us a little bit of the why behind the chapter that you wrote.
Sure. Hi, Laura. Thank you for having me. And I really appreciate Debbie for asking me to contribute to Volume 3. As a certified senior advisor and certified geriatric care manager, working in home care and having the families not only struggle with what do they need as far as like Dr. Morgan is saying with their time, but how am I going to pay for this? And it's a huge struggle, and people put off care. I get phone calls a year later from people who had, you know, checked it out, asked how much something was, how can we work it out, and they just didn't see the way. So I wrote chapter 12, how to navigate long-term care insurance and the importance of reading the fine print. Many adult kids taking care of their parents don't even know they have a long-term care policy. And that can take a huge burden off of them. And also the ones that do have the policies, they don't know how to read it and no one's there to guide them. And the insurance company is not going to tell you. They're not helpful. They're just not. Their goal is to not pay, right? That's just how it is, unfortunately. And you have older clients that don't have families either. So they're trying to navigate this policy they bought 20 years ago and they have no clue. So it was important for me. I've seen that struggle, people holding on to their policies, just, a lot of that.
Oh my, this topic. So, all of us probably now are thinking about our parents who are, still alive. Maybe they're aging. Maybe they have a policy. And I know I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know if my mom has a policy, so first thing is like, go have a conversation, right? Like, how do you want to start people on this journey of understanding?
I would say the first thing is check. Ask your parents, or ask your loved one, your aunt, your uncle, whoever that you are, going to be taking care of or helping through this journey, navigating it, and being able to stay home or even in assisted living. It helps pay for that as well. But one, ask if they had it. It was pretty common, in jobs. It was offered as part of the package, in big corporations. And then people bought them. It was big in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s to buy a policy. The bigger ones like John Hancock and CNA and those policies. So just have the conversation, get it out, know where it is, because that's the other part. Yes, I have it, but I don't know where it is. I haven't seen it for 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get it out and start to, understand what is offered, because every policy really is different and is tailored to the person's needs, or you can tailor it that way.
Yeah, I think this is so important. Leslie, thank you for being here to share this info with us today. This is going to change people's lives moving forward. All of you have these amazing kinds of information, tools, and we'll talk about all of that again in a few minutes here. Nancy, let's move over to you. Tell us a little bit about your why.
Well, thank you. I'm Nancy Treaster. I wrote chapter 4, Love Beyond Memory. And that chapter is focused on just showing up and staying present and then finding ways to connect. And specifically focused on dementia family caregivers on this chapter. I find, and that's what I do for a living now. I'm retired, as you said, but I co-founded a nonprofit that we support dementia family caregivers. And I find a lot of these caregivers are so focused on the trees, and by the trees, I mean the mechanics of caregiving. You can get so lost in managing medications, making doctor's appointments, driving people to doctor's appointments, going to the grocery store, just the mechanics of day-to-day caregiving. And they build and build and build to the point where you are just, drowning, if you will, in the mechanics of caregiving. And I learned this lesson the hard way myself. And so I find myself coaching people in this direction a lot. But that is, let's back up and look at the forest for a few minutes and get out of the mechanics of caregiving and sort of redefine some of the things that we're focused on in terms of what it means to be a good caregiver. How do we get beyond paying the bills and find the peace and the presence to just be with our loved one, to hold their hand, to listen to them while they talk? And that is such a hard thing to put in your collection of things to do when all you're thinking about is, I got to call the long-term care insurance company and figure out why they denied this claim, right? You're so involved in all that. And I learned it from, it's harder with people living with dementia because they can't tell you things to that extent. But my best friend passed away from ALS. And of course, was for her, she was on one of the very short journeys, like 9 months. And I went to spend the weekend with her one weekend, and her husband he'd been CEO of like 4 software companies. He was the CEO of the house. He was running back and forth between the grocery store and the pharmacy, making dinner for the caregivers, organizing caregiver schedules, and so on. And after a couple of days, she looked at me and she said, this is what he does all day long. And he's doing the very best he can to be her very best advocate and supporter, right? And she said, I just wish he'd sit with me and hold my hand. And people living with dementia can't tell you that. But, when you hear that from someone who can tell you, you realize sometimes we're missing the forest because we're in the trees.
Yeah, oh my goodness. Um, so this is a big job. And I liked when you said, he's doing the best he can. He's running around doing all the things because that's his job to do all the things. But when you're missing the human part, that's huge. Anything else you want to say about that?
So that's the tips I go through in my chapter, because I do think that's really important to kind of step back and think, how do I do that? That sounds great, Nancy, but how do I do that? So that's what I cover in the chapter.
Thank you, Nancy. So I have a huge thank you to all 3 of you. Thanks, not just for being here in this project, in this book, but I challenged you to put a vulnerable story into this book. And you all did it brilliantly. But then you stepped up in the second part of these chapters are your master teachings, your master tools, the things that you've spent a minute perfecting. The expertise and wisdom that you all have is amazing. And you put this into a practical experience in the chapter for people who are caregiving. So thank you for doing that. It's quite a thing to help the people that you help every day, but to get it in black and white on that page, right, is another thing. So thanks for doing that so well. Leslie, I want to start with you for this next question. We're going to kind of go back to something Makiba helped us start to think about first, and that's, filling your cup. But caregiving often leads to burnout, really sometimes pretty severe burnout. And I know you all have experiences, either personal or helping others with this. What do you think is one simple step our listeners can take today if this is what they're experiencing with their caregiving?
Yes, caregiver burnout is something I've witnessed. I've warned clients about. You're no good to who you're caring for if you're in the hospital. So you do have to, take a step back and think about, like Nancy said, like get away from maybe like the mechanics of everything and sit down and make a call. If you can't do it all yourself, call a home care company, call a certified senior advisor, call somebody who can maybe help you figure out what they can take off your plate. It doesn't have to be a lot of hours. It doesn't have to be every day, but you need time for you and your doctor's appointments and, your going to the grocery store, not to think about what your loved one needs, but just for you. What do I want? Because they forget to eat. So, tying it back to my chapter, they worry about the policy. Having somebody explain it to you and you not having to figure it out yourself does take a huge burden off of the caregiver and the family. Knowing, do you have an elimination period? Knowing how long it usually takes to approve a claim, the steps that happens, and what kind of caregivers so you have to use. Sometimes you can't use private caregivers. You have to use a company, and some companies file for you, some don't. So you want to figure out what is the best for you and take a little bit off of your plate. Let somebody else help you and ask questions. No question is a bad question. You don't know until you go through, the caregiving and home care in my case journey. You just don't. I've been in senior living for 25 years, and every single client and situation has been different because we're dealing with human beings. We're not dealing with a computer program. We're dealing with feelings and family dynamics, and that's huge as well. The family dynamics, that could be a whole nother chapter. But so yeah,
Yes, I know.
Let someone take a little bit off for you.
And you're making me chuckle because this is why there's 3 books so far. This is our volume 3 book about this, because we really do need this kind of resource guide. So many topics. Thank you, Leslie. Nancy, how about you? When you think about burnout, can you give us like the one simple step if a listener is really in it right now?
So interestingly enough, I put 4 tips in my chapter, and I'm talking about showing up, staying present, and keep finding ways to connect. And my 4th tip is about caregiver, taking care of yourself. Don't wait until you're drowning, because you can't show up, right? That's the first thing I said you need to be able to do, and you can't do it if you're drowning. So it is a big thing. I will say that in our nonprofit for dementia family caregivers, we actually have the first point that we make to people is right after diagnosis. You think, okay, now I'm a caregiver, or I'm going to be a caregiver as things progress, right? And we want you to think of yourself as a caregiver for 2 people. That diagnosis means you're a caregiver for 2 people. One, of course, is your person, but the second person is you, and it's 50-50. You have to care for yourself just as much as you care for the person you're loving, for all the reasons that have been said so far. But conceptually, if you can get in your head that you're a caregiver for both of you and that you have to keep that front and center, you can change your foundation for caregiving. Because a lot of the things after a diagnosis is, how do I create a good, solid foundation for the rest of my caregiving journey? In dementia caregiving, that can be on the average 10 years. So we want to create a solid foundation that's manageable. And so that's one of the first things we tell people.
Thank you for that. Okay, Makiba, what we're circling back around to this. You definitely started talking about it in your first answer. What do you want to add to this? Like, I'm like nodding my head to Leslie. I'm nodding my head to, right. It's all the things. What else? What else do you want to add?
Yeah, I'm nodding my head to them too. I think the thing that I would add is that as I've been working with people and trying to really understand and help them, what I've noticed is a common thread is that most of these caregivers, I call them high responsibility humans. They're people who take on responsibility of all the things all the time. And so when they are put in this role as caregiver, they are really serious about that work and how it's done. And some of them are a little controlling. And so I think one of the challenges is trusting other people to help, to step in, to, help support the loved one. So that's one of the things that I try to help people work on. It's trusting themselves, but then also trusting others and allowing other people to step in and help. It's one thing to say, call somebody to help, but if your sister or your brother is a jerk and they don't want to help, what do you do in that situation? Do you spiral and say, well, I'll just do it myself? Or do you work on really getting them to step in and do their part? Like, how do you do those things? So I think I love, the idea of thinking about yourself as a caregiver of both the person that you're taking care of and yourself, because you've got to do that. And so my prayer and my hope is that with resources like these books, the Caregivers Advocate series, that people get the strength and the foundation that they need to build that trust, build that muscle so they can really take care of themselves as well and get through the journey. 10 years is a long time to be a caregiver. And what I also find is that people lose themselves in the process. So at the end of the journey, then what? So it's a lot to think about. But my job, I believe, is to help people center, focus, get grounded, stay grounded. But yes, those are my observations.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And with this generous community, I'll talk about it a little bit later. If you are struggling, you don't need to. There's so many people to reach out to that can answer a question, you guys. So, okay. So I want to give all of you a chance to get into your work a little bit more. Nancy, I'm going to start with you. What's the most important thing you want us to know about finding those ways to connect with our loved one?
I do believe that there's a lot of focus, as we've said already, on the mechanics of caregiving. And in the Caregiver's Journey, which is our nonprofit that supports dementia family caregivers, we have resources, a podcast, as you said at the beginning, blogs on each podcast, as well as a Navigating Dementia Caregiving Journey roadmap that actually takes you through the 20 steps of dementia caregiving. And you click on any step. It's an interactive webpage, and it gives you the resources for that particular step. But with all that said, finding the place where you can accept what's happening and be present to what's happening right now, that's where you find kind of a peace in caregiving. And not everyone gets there. I got there. Sue, my business partner, got there, but not everyone gets there. You're so caught up in the mechanics of caregiving that you don't step back and just check your foundation for caregiving, and it spirals, as we've heard, and you can get spiraled out. And so creating that peace and calm, while in our podcast, we cover the mechanics of caregiving. We're a how-to podcast, as you said at the beginning. That's a big part of who we are. So the mechanics of caregiving are important. I'm not dismissing them, but finding a foundation where you say, I'm going to stop wishing for who they used to be. I'm going to stop fortune telling into the future about what might go wrong. I'm going to be present to what they have access to now, to who they are right now, and find a way to connect with this person today in a way that they can connect, and find a way to love who they are right now. There's a big piece in that. And I really want everyone who's a caregiver, if they can possibly get to it, to find that calm and peace.
I love that so much. Find the peace in your caregiving. You said so many wonderful things just now that will help people prioritize their focus there. I mean, it is about your loved one. Thank you, Nancy. Makiba, let us know the most important thing you want us to hear about how to stay whole while we care for everybody else.
Mhm. I feel like I've shared a lot of it already, and I think one of the challenges is sometimes it can seem selfish. And so I want people to think about it differently. I've heard this term over the past few years of self-full. That's the opposite of selfless, not selfish, So let's be self-full, fill that cup and make time for those things in the same way that you need to make time to eat and stay hydrated and do all of those things. Prioritize yourself, your health, and your well being so that you could be the best caregiver you can be.
I'm glad that you brought that up because that can feel selfish for people and that will lead into burnout if you're not careful and really taking care of yourself. But you also made me think of something like, and it gets talked about a lot, especially with all of you who are doing this every day. A lot of times this role gets dropped in our lap, whether we want it or not, whether we expected it or not. And, got to just come back and give yourself a little bit of, you know, grace and ease and be gentle with yourself, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, Leslie, tell us the most important thing you want us to know about navigating that long-term care insurance.
Well, I do want to circle back to what Makiba said about trust, building a rapport with anybody that calls asking for care. I want to make them know that I'm listening. I don't interrupt. I'm not just looking for, okay, how many hours do you want? And it's this rate. And yeah, I will send a caregiver. I want them to know that I am a resource for them as well. They can call me if they have a question. I make myself available, sometimes too much. And that does, become something that, I think we all have to work on, right? That's just something we all are so involved with our families and our clients. We take it personal sometimes, and it's not personal, but um, building that rapport so they trust in the information you're giving them. You want to make sure that they understand. Do they have questions? It's okay to ask questions. I'm happy to come over and look at the policy, and go over it with you. There's caveats in policies where you may have a 90-day elimination period, meaning you have to pay out of pocket before they'll start paying. But your policy has a home care clause where it's 10 days elimination period. So you're saving 80 days out of pocket. So it's just, there's so much information, along with the mechanics of it. It's getting organized. Who's going to be that person in the family that's the decision maker. And that is one of the hardest issues that I deal with. Again, the family dynamics, who's going to be the one that talks to the long-term care, that is the POA, that does make the home, healthcare surrogate decisions. So just being present and building a rapport and not rushing anybody into a decision. I always say I'm a terrible salesperson because that's not really, yes, I'm building our business, but I want people to understand that we, human and I especially, truly care about their loved one, and they're not just an invoice. We want to be the one that they go to with questions. And being a certified senior advisor, I have a lot of resources as well that I give. We all have resources. We build resources over the years. And I reach out to those people because I trust them with my clients. I know they're not going to scam a 90-year-old and try to get more money, or they're going to be, respectful to their property. So I think that's really what I want people, to know about in my chapter, especially, is just, it's very informative about long-term care. So something that people don't know a lot about, and they don't write these policies like they did anymore. So there's just a lot.
So much amazing information in these chapters. Leslie Sedil, Dr. Makiba, Morgan Hill, Nancy Treaster, thank you all so much for what you do in the world and for being here today to share it with everyone. As you all can hear, this is way more than a book. This is a very generous community. You may have heard something today that you have a question about, or you need support, or I don't know, you want to carry on the conversations that we started. Come on down into the show notes, because everybody is hooked up with their websites. Please go explore what all of these amazing authors are up to. They're there to help you out. You don't have to do it alone. We also hope that you go to get your beautiful copy of this book. I've got the link below for that. And lastly, today, everyone, remember, your words will change the world when you're brave enough to share them. So it is time to be brave. See you next time, everyone.